You don't say it out loud, but you've noticed it. Nothing lands anymore. Not success, not rest, not distraction. Even pleasure feels thin, like it dissolves the moment you touch it. You still go through the motions, laugh when expected, nod at the right moments, but something fundamental has gone quiet inside you, and you suspect it isn't depression in the simple sense. It feels more structural than emotional, more psychological than sad. This video is about why you can't enjoy anything anymore. Not as a metaphor, not as motivation, as a precise diagnosis of what has shifted in your perception, your nervous system, and the way you interpret reality. If this feeling has been following you, it's because you're already sensing the truth beneath it. This video unfolds in connected parts. Each one removes a layer. Skipping any part will fracture the understanding. Most people believe enjoyment disappears because something is missing. More money, better relationships, freedom, stimulation, meaning. They assume the problem is external, measurable, correctable. This is the first illusion. What actually disappears is not pleasure, but credibility. The world stops feeling believable. You begin to notice that almost everything around you is performance. Conversations feel rehearsed. Reactions feel delayed. Morality feels cosmetic. People say the right things, display the right emotions, signal the correct values, but nothing behind their eyes moves. At first, you think you're becoming cynical. Later, you realize you're simply seeing more clearly. Social life runs on masks, but most people mistake masks for faces. They believe smiles indicate warmth, outrage indicates conviction, kindness indicates virtue. You were trained to read behavior at face value, to assume expression equals intention. That training works only as long as you don't look too closely. Once you do, enjoyment starts collapsing. Not because life worsens, but because illusion loses its anesthetic effect. People don't act from who they are. They act from what maintains their position. Morality becomes situational. Empathy becomes selective. Principles bend depending on who's watching. None of this is exceptional, it's normal. What's unusual is noticing it. And once noticed, it can't be unseen. You start catching micro-inconsistencies. The person who preaches humility while chasing recognition. The one who speaks about honesty but edits their story depending on the audience. The moral outrage that appears only when it's socially rewarded. These aren't hypocrisies in the dramatic sense. They're structural. Human behavior is optimized for survival inside systems, not for truth. Enjoyment relies on immersion. Immersion requires suspension of disbelief. But when you see the strings, the show stops working. The second illusion is the belief that people know themselves. Most don't. They narrate their actions after the fact, constructing stories that protect their self-image. You're not interacting with raw motivation. You're interacting with rationalizations, polished explanations that sound sincere because the person believes them. That's what makes them convincing. When you internalize this, interactions flatten. Compliments feel transactional. Conflicts feel scripted. Even intimacy begins to feel like role play. Not because people are malicious, but because self-awareness is rare and uncomfortable. Most people outsource it to ideology, identity, or group consensus. Society rewards coherence, not honesty. A person who contradicts themselves publicly loses status. So contradictions are hidden, not resolved. Over time, this creates a culture where appearance replaces substance. Depth becomes risky, silence becomes safer than truth, and emotional displays become strategic rather than spontaneous. You feel this shift most strongly in moments that should feel meaningful. Celebrations, achievements, shared victories. The emptiness afterward isn't random, it's perceptual. You're reacting to the gap between what is presented and what is real. The mind registers the mismatch even if you don't articulate it. The third illusion is believing enjoyment is an internal resource you've lost, as if something inside you broke, but what's actually changed is your tolerance for incoherence. Earlier in life, you could accept contradiction without friction. Now, it grates. Your mind refuses to smooth over what doesn't align. You're not bored. You're understimulated by authenticity. Modern life intensifies this. Social platforms reward performance. Work cultures reward compliance. Relationships reward predictability. The more you participate, the more you're required to fragment yourself into acceptable versions. Watching others do the same becomes exhausting once you see it clearly. Pleasure depends on trust. Trust that what you're seeing is what's there. When that trust erodes, pleasure can't root. You can still laugh, but it doesn't echo. You can still succeed, but it doesn't settle. The nervous system stays alert, not relaxed. This is why distraction stops working. Entertainment relies on emotional buy-in. Once your perception sharpens, surface-level narratives lose grip. You're not too intelligent. You're too aware to be easily absorbed. The surface illusion convinces people that enjoyment fades because life becomes harder. In reality, it fades because perception becomes sharper than the structures designed to contain it. You begin outgrowing the psychological stage most environments operate on, and nothing is more isolating than clarity inside a world optimized for performance. Once the surface illusion collapses, a more unsettling question appears. If people are not driven by the values they claim, what are they driven by? The answer is not character, it is not intention, it is not even desire in the conscious sense. Beneath behavior there is an engine that runs, quietly, automatically, and without moral language. The first truth is that most human action is fear management, disguised as choice. Fear of exclusion, fear of losing status, fear of becoming irrelevant. These fears rarely announce themselves. Instead, they shape preferences, opinions, and even personalities. What looks like confidence is often just a well-rehearsed defense against being dismissed. What looks like ambition is often panic given structure. When you see this, admiration becomes complicated. The second truth is that the ego does not seek happiness. It seeks coherence. The ego's primary job is to maintain a stable story of who I am. Anything that threatens that story is filtered out, reframed, or attacked. This is why people can endure lives that don't satisfy them while fiercely defending the identities that trap them. Enjoyment is secondary. Narrative survival comes first. The third truth is that conditioning outpaces awareness. By adulthood, most reactions are pre-decided. Emotional responses are triggered faster than conscious thought can intervene. People don't evaluate situations, they reenact templates, family dynamics, cultural scripts, unresolved power struggles from childhood. When you speak to someone, you're often speaking to a pattern, not a person. That realization drains interactions of novelty. The fourth truth is that morality is often a post hoc justification for instinct. Humans feel first, then explain. They align ethical language around impulses they didn't choose. This is why moral certainty is usually loud and brittle. It isn't grounded in reflection. It's defending an internal alignment already in motion. Once you notice this, moral conversations feel hollow, more like signaling than inquiry. The fifth truth is that the nervous system prioritizes safety over truth. This explains why people resist insights that would liberate them. Insight threatens structure. Structure equals safety. So the mind prefers familiar discomfort to unknown freedom. You begin to see people actively sabotaging clarity because clarity destabilizes the systems they depend on: relationships, roles, beliefs. The sixth truth is that identity is a survival strategy, not a discovery. People adopt identities that offer belonging and protection. Over time, the identity hardens. Contradictory information becomes dangerous. This is why discussions feel repetitive. You're not exchanging ideas. You're watching defensive architecture at work. The same phrases, the same emotional reactions, the same predictable outcomes. The final truth is the most corrosive to enjoyment. Awareness breaks enchantment. Once you see the machinery, you can't emotionally participate the same way. It's not that others are fake. It's that behavior is mechanized far more than advertised. Spontaneity exists, but it's rare and fragile. This is where your enjoyment didn't disappear. It was crowded out, replaced by constant low-level vigilance. Your mind started tracking subtext, motives, inconsistencies. It stopped surrendering to moments because surrender requires trust, and trust requires opacity. You feel detached, not because you're numb, but because your perception is running ahead of your environment. You're awake inside systems designed for sleepwalking. The cost of that awareness is pleasure. The benefit is clarity. Most people never experience the trade-off consciously. You did. And once the hidden engine is seen, returning to innocence is not an option. The question becomes what to do with perception that no longer allows escape. At some point, the focus shifts, not outward anymore, inward. You stop asking why people behave the way they do and start noticing how predictable the patterns are, not just in others, but in yourself. This is where judgment dissolves, not because you become forgiving, but because you recognize repetition as something deeper than choice. Adult behavior is rarely adult in origin. It is adaptive. It forms early, long before language could explain it. The nervous system learns first. The mind rationalizes later. What you're witnessing in others, the defensiveness, the performative morality, the hunger for validation, is not random. It is continuity. The same internal strategies running on adult hardware. People don't seek enjoyment, they seek regulation. What calms their internal chaos becomes who they are. Some regulate through control, some through admiration, some through conflict, some through self-erasure. These patterns stabilize early, usually around moments when emotional needs were unmet or unpredictably rewarded. The body remembers before the mind understands. This is why change is rare and cosmetic. To truly change would mean destabilizing the internal system that once kept the person psychologically safe. The adult may hate the pattern consciously, but the child inside depends on it. So the pattern repeats, dressed in new circumstances, new relationships, new rationales. From the outside, it looks irrational. From the inside, it feels necessary. You begin to see this everywhere. The person who constantly overachieves is not chasing success. They are chasing relief from an old sense of insufficiency. The one who withdraws emotionally is not cold. They are avoiding a familiar pain of exposure. The one who moralizes loudly is often protecting a fragile self-concept built under scrutiny. These are not flaws. They are scars that learned how to function. This recognition quietly turns the lens on you. Why does enjoyment feel inaccessible? Not because the world is empty, but because your own patterns no longer deliver regulation the way they once did. Whatever once soothed you, distraction, validation, achievement, intensity, has lost its effect. Not because it was wrong, but because you've outgrown its capacity to stabilize you. You're no longer anesthetized by repetition. There is a subtle grief here, not dramatic, structural. The grief of realizing that much of what felt like desire was actually compensation, that many pleasures were not expressions of aliveness, but temporary suspensions of inattention. When that tension changes, the pleasure collapses with it. This is why nothing feels wrong enough to fix, yet nothing feels right enough to enjoy. You're between regulatory systems. The old ones are exposed, the new ones haven't formed. In this gap, perception sharpens further. You notice your own automatic reactions, the impulse to perform, to withdraw, to dominate, to disappear. And you see them not as moral failures, but as inherited strategies. The danger here is self-contempt. Many people turn this awareness into a weapon against themselves. They call it accountability, but it's just redirected judgment. That path leads to paralysis. The more precise realization is colder and more accurate. You are not broken, you are patterned. Patterns don't respond to motivation, they respond to disruption. This is why surface-level changes fail. New goals, new habits, new environments. They rearrange the stage, but the script remains. The same emotional arcs replay, the same dissatisfaction returns. Enjoyment cannot emerge where the nervous system is still negotiating old threats. You also begin to understand why others seem content. It's not that they have more joy, it's that their patterns are still functioning. Their illusions still regulate them. Their identities still provide frictionless meaning. You don't envy that anymore. You just recognize the difference. Awareness creates distance. Distance dissolves immersion. Immersion is where enjoyment lives, so you stand outside it now, watching patterns operate, seeing yourself included, not superior, not exempt, just awake enough to notice the loops. This is the deep core of why you can't enjoy anything anymore. Not because life lost color, but because you can no longer confuse regulation with fulfillment. And that distinction, once seen, rearranges everything. The world didn't suddenly become empty, it became legible. Enjoyment fades when reality stops lying to you, when patterns reveal themselves, when people, systems, and even your own reactions lose their mystery. What you're left with is not despair, but exposure, raw structure, cold clarity. This is why the world will break you, unless you become ruthless. Not ruthless in action, ruthless in perception, ruthless about what you allow to regulate you, about what you mistake for meaning, about which illusions you permit to anesthetize you just to feel comfortable again. Most people survive by dulling themselves, by choosing coherence over truth, by shrinking awareness until pleasure fits again. You didn't do that, or you can't anymore. And that's why nothing feels enjoyable, because enjoyment was never designed to coexist with full awareness. The mistake is thinking this is a problem to solve. It isn't. It's a threshold. On one side, immersion, comfort, unconscious repetition. On the other, clarity, distance, and the quiet responsibility of seeing things as they are. The world breaks people who expect it to be sincere, nourishing, or fair. It rewards those who understand its mechanics without resenting them. Ruthlessness here doesn't mean cruelty, it means precision. Emotional economy, the refusal to give your nervous system to structures that can't hold it anymore. If this video unsettled you, that's not accidental. It's recognition. Let it sit. Let it reorganize how you interpret your boredom, your detachment, your loss of pleasure. Don't rush to replace what collapsed. Something had to fall apart for you to see this clearly.